So listen, I was watching. I'll tell you about a movie I was watching recently. So Rena actually got me onto this. It's called Kuruta Ipeiji, which is a page of madness in Japanese, and it's actually a silent film. So I haven't really seen that many silent films. In fact, besides maybe Metropolis. And
yes, of course, you've seen Metropolis. I didn't even need to ask if you've seen Metropolis.
And I'm just trying to think maybe what else is there. That's the first one that comes to mind. But really, it was quite well done. It's 1926 Japanese. Very, you could technically you can say it's very, it's aged. They didn't really have that much gear to work with, but the story is very beautiful. It's this kind of descent into madness of this janitor living in an asylum, and I found it really interesting because it reminded me a lot of I read a lot of that literature from that period, from sort of the 1920s in Japan, the Taisho era. And a lot of them, went crazy. It was just a thing that was happening. You got Akutagawa, and these different people. And it's actually this is based on a story by Kawabata, who, as you know, is one of my favorite authors, Yasunori Kawabata. From his early days, because he's kind of got these two phases where in the early days, in the 20s, he was just a young gun doing short stories with his friends, and that was the kind of the club of guys hanging around Tokyo doing that. And then in his later life, he did some of the other stuff. But this is from that sort of earlier period. I think the magazine they were working on was called Bunka Jidai, which is like, Bungei Jidai, sorry. So like a short magazine, and a lot of these guys collaborated. And it's like a period in time that I get really nostalgic about, but not that I was there, but you know what I mean.
Well, maybe you were.
Maybe I was. But yeah, it's a really well done story. So it's actually on YouTube. It's public domain. So if anyone gets a chance to check that out, I highly recommend it. And there's a couple of versions, but there's one that's got a really good soundtrack that was actually, I think it's like Criterion or something. So I don't know if that one's public domain, but the one we saw anyway, it had this soundtrack that was made for the film.
Oh, fantastic.
Which is really cool because I think having a silent film with no music is pretty banal, but if you've got the soundtrack, it really just, you don't even need the words, it just works. Have you seen anything lately?
You know what, actually, no, surprisingly, and that's a really boring answer.
It's okay.
But in the, towards the end of living in Tokyo, my wife and I really got deeply into Ozu. Yasuda Ozu. Yeah. And I've already talked about him a couple of times in the podcast, but I really do love his slice of life storytelling and how every single one of his movies is pretty much the same thing. And he's just going over this story, refining it, making it better, wriggling out the wrinkles.
Well, what did he call himself? The tofu maker or something like that, right? He just does one thing and one thing only.
That's right. Yeah. That makes so much sense. And, all of his stories are about, or most of his stories are about, the mother figure in the family has died. The father has been left alone with the daughter. The daughter is going to leave home because she's getting married. Basically, this is the Ozu way. And you'd think that it would be really boring watching this over and over again, but Ozu has a special way of making movies that are just so captivating.
Yeah.
And I'm really into it, and especially his last one. An Autumn Afternoon, I think, was his last movie. 1963.
Is that the one with the opening scene of like a factory, and it's because is it because the Japanese name, is it Sanma no Aji? Is that the one we're talking about?
Sanma no Aji, yeah.
Is that his last film?
I think that's his last film. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, because that's color. And it's yeah. That's probably my favorite of his. And there's actually a danshi sort of subtly referenced in that film.
Oh, really?
Yeah. It's funny because I knew it was in the film, but when you actually try to find it, it's really subtle. Like there's just a sort of a fleeting reference to it, and because they don't actually live in the danshi. They're living in like a. I mean, it's kind of like a danshi, but it's a company apartment. But you do get references to it. But at that point, they were clean and new and the new Japan. So I sort of came back to that when I was working on that series. And yeah, just some of the stuff like I think the train station that I think it might even be Ikegami Station or something, where it's sort of South Tokyo. But yeah, just everything about it is just beautiful. I mean,
absolutely beautiful. Yeah, and Chishu is fantastic.
Yeah, I haven't seen that actually.
I mean the main actor. Sorry.
Oh, sorry. Oh no, you're all good. Oh yeah, no, I'm trying to think. Is that the husband of the the wife of the character?
No. So Chishidu is the always the father figure in all the movies. He's the one who's always playing the father or the grandfather, and he's pretty much in every single Osu movie.
It's all coming back to me. So he's the guy who was in the war, and he goes into the bar and he orders the
yes.
The young guy comes in. He's like, "Oh, Captain!"
And he's marching around the bar, and I fucking love it.
He's like, imagine if we'd won the war, we'd be in New York drinking.
It's so great.
Yeah. No, sorry, you got me there. No, that's cool. Yeah, man, I know what it's like though. Time gets away on you, and you don't get time to watch movies and stuff.
I've been reading, which is good. I finally started reading Malcolm Gladwell's The Outliers, and it's one of those books that I've wanted to read for so long, and I've just never come across it or found it. But really fascinating. He takes a dive into a lot of topics, but most famous is, of course, his idea about the 10,000 rule, 10,000 hour rule, sorry, that if you want to get really good at something, you need to practice it for 10,000 hours. Yeah. And that was fascinating. But also he starts talking about how if you were born in 1954 or 1955, around there, you were perfectly of age when technology started to grow. So, for example, Bill Gates, Steve Jobs, and the guy who started Google, what was his name?
Sergey.
Larry Page?
Yeah, those guys. Yeah,
they were all born within 1 year of each other. Yeah. All of them. And Malcolm Gladwell was saying that this was the perfect age because when you were 21, technology was starting to grow. You were old enough to take advantage of it. You weren't too old that you were having babies and having families. You weren't too young that you were still in high school. You were ripe at the technology boom, which is why all these companies are founded by people who were 1 year apart.
That's interesting you mentioned that. I'm going to hit you back on that though and say that applies in that very specific scenario. But there is the idea of, I think they call it the Texas sharpshooter or something, where someone just shoots a whole bunch of bullets and then you just happen to find two that are together.
Right.
You circle them and say, all right, this guy's a great shot.
I
would hit back and say I think there were a couple of maybe macro things that were happening. And that just happened to be that those guys could do that.
There was definitely luck of the draw and all sorts of things that helped them.
Yeah. Speaking of technology, though, I've been on that. I was mentioning I was on another podcast the other week, and they kind of put me in a corner, and they're like, "Oh, Cody, so tell me about NFTs." I'm like, "Oh, well, I'm not really a spokesman for NFTs, but I do know some of our patrons have asked us to talk about that previously, and just give our thoughts and ideas there. So, is that a topic that you're interested in?
100%. Yeah, let's deep dive into the NFT.
Because we've been talking about creative stuff, but I kind of I'm ready to talk about some technology. So I mean, obviously, people following it, it kind of had this parabolic thing happen where it's it was big, and now it's it's dead. No one's doing it. Has it finished? Blah blah blah. I kind of saw it coming a little bit, and I was like, okay. this thing's definitely going to have a big hype cycle. Every Tom, Dick, and his dog, as we say, is going to get on the bandwagon. But now that it's kind of, that's finished, is actually a really good time, I think, to come back to what it actually is and what it potentially offers for creatives and artists as kind of a new way of operating, a new way of interacting with audiences, a new way of kind of delivering work as well. I mean, there's a whole bunch of things wrapped up into it, and I'm not fully sure. I mean, it's kind of an emerging thing, it's not decided yet. So, I mean, what is your take on the situation?
I think I liked there really was a community focus with the NFT artists that were around, and I feel like in the NFT world, even just 3 months ago, we sold our piece on Foundation. It was 3 months, wasn't it?
Yeah. And thank you to Anonymous. Person.
Yeah, I wish we knew who that was.
It's all good. They might, they could be Satoshi.
They might get in contact.
Yeah.
During that whole time, 3 months ago, feels like so long ago, 3 months ago, during that time, the push was community. And I really like seeing this as something that I'm really, really fond of, artists helping out artists. But at the same time, if you really, I don't know about you, buddy, but if I really started delving into it and I started looking through Twitter and seeing all these people talking about community and, you've got to support the NFT community or you're not going to make any sales, blah, blah, blah. It all just seemed like a smokescreen, and it was just it was just the biggest artists that everybody was trying to get, love from, or the biggest artists that everyone was trying to support. The little artists weren't really getting anything.
I'll tell you what, man, if I was to categorize it, I think those 3 months ago, it made me feel quite uncomfortable, sometimes. And in a way, it was just I think there was a lot of potential, which I still see, and I want to talk to you a bit more about. But I think the issue with the shilling and all of that kind of came to a head. And as we've talked about previously, I think social media can be toxic sometimes. It can make it difficult to create. There's a reason historically why artists often tend to have periods where they're working by themselves and this flow state, the 10,000 hours, all of that stuff is you can't do that when you're tweeting, So I think there was kind of some issues there. And then I think also from a macro level, people were sort of well, what is happening here with crypto more generally? What's happening with technology? A lot of fear, a lot of misunderstanding, that sort of thing. And so, I was looking at it and I was like, okay, what's the long game here? We sold a number of pieces together. You and I collaborated on the moments with little, for people listening, so little videos based, and I guess animated images with a story and a soundscape by yourself. Is that how we're going to talk about them? Is that what they are?
I think so. Yeah, like little slices of life.
Little slices of life, and you can go check them out and see what they are. But the idea was that they were potentially one of the first, blockchain-based stories. And making full use of the media. So, being able to use the IPFS interplanetary file system, storing it on the chain, the details of it, all of that. So it's there, and it, with each sale, it kind of unlocks the next one, was the idea, right? And I had this kind of grand vision, and we kind of worked it out as we went. So we didn't have it fully nutted out at first, but we kind of slowly worked out that we wanted to create a system where the community would demand the next one. And so they would have to come together somehow, or someone would have to, commit to buying the latest piece or one of the pieces in the storyline to kind of unlock the next piece of the story.
The next one.
And I thought there was something really powerful there, because looking at the ways that artists put out work for free and they just put stuff out there and they just go, and then they have to kind of find these other little ways to monetize it, which are often kind of quite secondary. And that can be very hard for people to actually successfully do, and with this, it was like a really direct way to say, well, if you want to see the next one, if you want to see the next episode, someone has to buy it. It doesn't have to be you, but somebody has to buy it. And the idea is, and we didn't really, we haven't really tried to scale this up or anything, but the idea is that, they would have to find a way to do that. And it kind of worked. We sold the latest, we sold 7, was it, or 6?
Yes.
Number 6. And then that unlocked the next ones. And we're sort of still sitting there. I'm like, I'm kind of wondering one day, maybe someone, because we do have the next piece of the story ready to go, don't we?
We do have it ready to upload and go. And I think, possibly 3 months down the line when Ethereum gets a bit more traction again and we enter the bear market.
So they run the bulls in Spain and bears hibernate. That's the way.
Oh, that's how you know. Right. That makes total sense. So next time you get the bull market, maybe a bit more traction. But yeah, I know what you mean, what you said earlier about like shilling it and trying to get it in front of people. It just felt really like we were working for Amway or something, like this pyramid scheme.
Actually, I mean, Amway gets a bit of flack, but pyramid schemes. I mean, it's controversial, really. I mean, the other issue is also at a higher level, talking about crypto. It's like there is a whole, a whole kind of group of people who are like, everything that's not Bitcoin is a shitcoin, as they say. And it's like, is Ethereum really going to stand up to the test of time, because there are other networks emerging that can kind of handle stuff a little bit better. Especially some of these big things. It's hard to say, man. It's an emergent. There's no answers really. It's just sort of
and literally, it was just 3 months ago, like the explosion. It was just so popular.
Yeah, I mean, I'm really interested though in sort of some of the changes that are taking place and just sort of some of the conversations. Like I've got some good friends who are working in that space and. Working on metaverses. So building spaces that are, they live on the blockchain, the ownership of parcels of land and things like that. And then you can go and explore these spaces in your browser and that, and looking at what they're doing and saying, wow, this is really fucking cool. Actually, I have a friend working on Substrata, which is another metaverse, and he gave me a parcel and I was able to put some of my artwork on there and it's like, this is really cool. It's kind of like the dream of like VR and kind of the internet as imagined back in the day, like back in the late 90s, early 2000s, people like, well, what's the future going to be like? Because did you ever see Second Life? Did you come across that?
Was that the video game where you make a avatar and then you can
have a
go
second
around?
life?
Yeah.
Back in the day, and that was like I remember reading about that as like in postmodern thought that was like this huge thing. It's like, wow, we're going to fully simulacra ourselves into the machine, and it's like compared to what's possible today, it's like, man, it's nothing, So things are moving so quickly now. In a way, the theorists and the kind of the people looking at things critically are almost unable to keep up. They're sort of being dragged behind. The bandwagon's going 100 miles an hour, and these guys just were trailing behind. But it's really interesting, and just seeing how, as I kind of open my mind to what's happening, because I think it's easy to get yourself into a position where you're not seeing what's going on, and you've got set ideas, and okay, I'm not going to deviate from there. I know what I know, and people think that doesn't happen until you get really old or whatever, but man, it happens at any age, and you have to actively fight it in a way. And so looking at kind of where things are emerging, kind of where are the ground swells, what are people doing, what are younger people doing, because, you and I, we knew what was up once upon a time, but now it's like, there's actually a whole another generation pretty much who's coming into tech. And young adults and that, and they're interfacing with things in a completely different way to the way you and I did at that age. And looking at what they're doing, they're going to be carrying that with them all the way through, as they get older. And that's market change, that's things changing. And I don't know, as I work with more people and sort of see what people are doing, I'm like, damn, man, you got to just keep your eyes open, ears open, and just be humble and listen to what people are doing, see what they're doing, and just kind of, you know what I mean? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely, man. And I'm just reminded of what you said earlier when you said that you saw the NFT boom. You did predict it a little bit, right? Like you introduced me completely to it. I had absolutely no idea about what it was before you said anything. And we started talking about it, I would say about a month and a half before the news articles in NYT, New York Times, and all like this. We started talking about it about a month and a half before that. So how did you know, man?
That's not really that much foresight, really, I guess. But like I had been exposed to it through again through some of my friends here who were working on these metaverses, and how they were selling parcels of land, and and they had built these systems, and what I was quite aware of what it was, and I guess what I was trying to work out is how do artists apply this, because a lot of it was fancy hats and these kind of virtual parcels, but there was all this these systems that people would have to build to be able to offer that. But how does an artist come in and interface with that? And I was just trying to kind of ideating, and I actually had a chat with my friend. I was like, oh man, we could run some virtual galleries, that link through to the work and and he actually had a spot on CryptoVoxels, it was like a really good parcel, and we're like, oh man, we should do a gallery up on there. And I think what held me back was I was like, I didn't want to just put in like the same old thing that I'd done and just put it into this thing, and it's like, it's now new. It's like I kind of wanted to make something that fit the media, and that was with these conversations with you, and I was like, oh man, what can we do here? And we decided on this kind of animated format, and I think it was cool, I think there was a really good concept there, but there was also at the same time everyone doing everything, and all of these kind of memes, and it was kind of the Wild West in a way, and a lot of noise, noise to signal, signal to noise
ratio.
And so again, coming back to the long term, if there is a long term with this, I think it's like a maturation of the work, something a little bit more solid. I could see things where it's like episodes of a show where it's like, to unlock it, you gotta somebody has to somehow engage with it to kind of make it available, or everyone kind of gets a key to it, things like that, and not in a draconian way. I don't want to see it used for like copyright, digital rights protection. I mean, if the community has paid for it, the community gets to see it. You know what I mean? Like that's kind of what I think, and that's what we did with the stories, with the moments, because ultimately I think it's easy to get quite protective of things and kind of cloister, sort of hold them too close, and then they never get to breathe. And the issue is, of course, for artists trying to sell stuff and make money, it's like, well, it's hard, and so you think, well, shit, if I just give it away and then you get nothing back, you've just given it away. But and that's just been the default mode of operation for years, right? And you know what that's like. It's like, how do you get people to hear it, but how do you also get them to pay for it to support your practice and your work? And I kind of just thought, there was, there must have been, there's something in there where it's like you can connect the dots, and people can support the work. The artists get paid. There's no BS in the middle, and it just happens. But I think we're still kind of working that out, at
the moment. But I think if somebody did buy the last piece of Moments, the latest piece on Foundation, the latest piece. Sorry, we would come back and upload the next one, right?
Oh yeah.
So the project's still alive.
It's on its back burner mode, and again, I think
we're just not shilling it.
We're not actively shilling.
Because it just felt so dirty.
I don't shill. I think it's Anyway, but and then the bigger idea, which I feel like this is kind of what I wanted to talk about, so I hope that's okay. The bigger idea that I have been thinking about lately is what I'm going to call the Hacker Ethos, and this is something that's really important to me. So reflecting on kind of going back to the old days, I think we're all kind of geeks in our own way. and we all kind of go through these phases. And if I go back to kind of my origin story and where a lot of the work, a lot of the work came from, it was this kind of wandering and spending time by myself, all of this sort of thing. And a lot of that, in a way, is kind of connected with this idea of the hacker. And, people that say, ransomware hackers, that's a whole thing. But kind of the old school hacker, which is like curiosity, tinkering with technology. If it wasn't a computer, the previous generation would be tinkering with vehicles or in a workshop, working on something. Just these kind of ideas of just kind of playing with things and trying ideas out, kind of going against status quo sometimes, doing your own thing, being independent, all of that sort of thing. And I've been coming back and I'm like, this is something that it was actually quite formative for me. I mean, so what I mean by that is, this idea of like, individual sovereignty, having a plan for yourself, not kind of being sort of semi-skeptical of what's going on, but also like, not turning yourself off to what's going on. And there's just, I think there's been this idea with technology, with big social media companies, with big market, internet companies and that, where it's like, we've all just become numbers, and we've become kind of just a quantity. And one of my favorite movies, my guilty pleasures, is actually called Hackers, with Angelina Jolie. And there's a scene where the guy's like, the guy, was it the plague, the bad guy's like, see all those normal people, they're like cattle. Moo. and we're the cowboys. But anyway, this idea of like this kind of individual who's able to just kind of sort this shit out and have a plan and, isn't falling into line with necessarily what is wanted by the powers to be. And I know that sounds a bit political, but what I saw with some of this technology that's emerging is kind of almost like a loop back to some of those old school internet ideals, kind of from the old days, before all of these big companies took over. And, like even with something like email, so I started using, I got off Gmail, started using Proton Mail, and it's like,
how is it?
That's great, man. Like based out of Switzerland, they're not scanning my shit for advertisement. I was a little bit like, is it going to be okay? But yeah, man, they just updated their thing. And I'm not trying to shill that, but that just to make the step to do that, it was like, I don't know, it was like this like mental step because it becomes so normal to be like, well, just hook up to Gmail, do Google.
Sure.
And it's like, man, these guys do not care. And, they could shut your emails down, all of that stuff. And we've let it happen. And going back to the kind of the old school, the real way, it's like, yeah, man, manage it yourself. And with email in particular, you can't really do that because it's, the technology, that the IPs, there's a lot of technical challenges there to run your own email server. But Proton Mail, they're legit, and they're just literally a different service provider. It's not that hard to move over to them, but just a conceptual thing. And in a way, NFTs, crypto, all of this stuff, emerging stuff, macro stuff, it kind of doesn't, it's not clear until you kind of really look at it, if you know what I mean.
Yeah. Are you talking about like carving your own piece of the internet? I guess you're sort of talking, making your own website, making your own blog, sort of stepping away from Tumblr and all this, and carving your own.
These services, and this is classic postmodern kind of thought. But there's this guy, Marshall McLuhan, and he was like this old school theorist, and he's like, the medium is the message. And this is like one of these things they teach you like your first year at university studying media. And it's like, and what he means by that is like the way that you engage with a thing, if it's a television, because in his day it was talking about television. So you're engaging through through the television, that's going to inform the way you see it. And so the context is really important. And so the medium defines the message. And so if the medium that you're engaging with is Facebook or Tumblr or whatever, that's the lens, that's the pipe that you see the world through. And I think in a way we've kind of forgotten that because the internet's become so, so common and not just like, I mean, in the old days, there's people who are like, not connected, but now everyone's super connected all the time.
Yeah.
And so, everything's getting funneled through these kind of same three pipes. And what that means is your ability to kind of look outside of those pipes is really limited. and I find that quite uncomfortable. It's like we're all just the cattle again.
Yeah. How are you dealing with social media at the moment? Are you still off Twitter and?
No. It's interesting. I mean, I come through these phases, but I'm coming into a phase now where I'm feeling a lot more comfortable, just kind of saying it as it is. And I think I went through many years where I was like, okay, I don't really want to say anything. I don't think I have anything that anyone really wants to listen to, anyway. But that's kind of just me being me. But like, I realized, and I did that talk the other day. I've been doing these talks with you, and I'm like, yeah, there's things that probably no one else is, there's things that I should say that, people should hear. And I think if I don't say them, who's going to say them? And kind of, you know what I mean? Like,
well, you have a unique take on things. You've lived abroad for 10 years. You've come back home. You see things in a different way, which is great. And it's really good to chat to you about this kind of stuff, because you do. It's really good that I can just feed you a little nugget of information and then you just run with it for so long, and you have so much to say. Yeah,
but I think with I guess I don't really have a theme here, but I guess what I'm getting at is like I think there's something there. That is getting me really excited, and with just seeing what's happening with Bitcoin, seeing what's happening with NFTs, I just feels like there's a groundswell, and there's a lot of negativity. There's a lot of people who are like, this, they're not looking at it. There's criticisms of it, and that's all good. That's part of it. But at the same time, I'm like, man, this is like, we're back in the early days of the internet when things were kind of free, and it was a wild west, and bad things happen, good things happen. But it was creation, man. And that was like, you're talking about Bill Gates, was it 1955? We're talking like, man, 2021, that was the year that shit really got real, and, economies started putting reserve currencies in digital, crypto, and people started selling digital artworks, and it was this whole thing. And I don't know, it just seems like it's like the beginning of a thing and a snowball. And when you can start to see the snowball coming, and you actually look up and you're like, holy shit, it's coming. And you look around, no one else is looking at it, and it's just this thing on their news that they scroll past. I don't know. It's exciting, but also kind of like, wow, I don't know what to do.
Yeah. It's difficult to know what to do.
Yeah.
But we're still in it. If if we do get a sale one day, we'll probably jump back on it a little bit.
No need to shill, but we're all good. We'll see what happens.
I'm definitely not going to ever talk about it again. But maybe on the podcast we can talk about it a little bit.
I'm keen to see where it kind of goes, because there is a storyline there we've talked about, and I've got some ideas. But we'll put that into its box.
Put on the back burner. Turn the gas down. What do you think about starting a commune? Is that something that you'd be interested in?
You mean you and me?
Community off the grid sort of thing.
Well, actually, I've started.
Not necessarily you and me, but what about you?
So I've actually started hanging out with these guys. Well, I've been hanging out with them for ages, but they call themselves the solar punks, and. So, I mean, I'm a hacker, but I'm also a cyberpunk, before it was cool. But these solar punk, we might have talked about this idea of like a utopian cyberpunk future. If cyberpunk is the dystopian megacorps, solar punk is the citadels, Bitcoiner, everyone has a great standard of living in the world, and human dignity is restored to every single person, right? And this idea that like, using solar power, renewable stuff, growing your own food and vegetables, but also using the best aspects of technology. So one of my friends is working on a system of modular furniture and like structural design, and you can basically build a design, and it's kind of like Legos but for larger structures, using these like standard wooden peg things. And he built like a table and a bunch of things, and it looks really cool. And this idea that, you could have these like kind of apply this like mass production kind of methodology to, stuff that people could actually use in their daily lives in a really sustainable way. So using pine and like sustainable forestry for these materials. And that, so I thought that was really cool. And that's kind of like semi-commune kind of van life kind of stuff. and that there's a little bit of that in New Zealand, actually, to be honest. And if people are interested, it's called Grid Kit. That's the name of the company.
Grid Kit.
Well, Village Kit is the bigger company, and then Grid Kit is one of these products that is for the tables and the furniture. But yeah, there's actually quite a lot of communes in New Zealand, man. Like, people don't realize, but there's a lot of people who live off the grid. It's not quite like maybe like the United States where you get these like survivalist types, but there is communities here, and because it's such a small country, you can kind of like go dip into the city and get stuff if you need to. I don't know though. I'm a little bit like, not fully sold on the idea like of a benign dictatorship in the village, but yeah, I don't know. What about you? Like, you're going to start a commune on the boat, or?
I would absolutely love to. I mean, me and Chia Chan have always been talking about this sort of idea of building a small community where everybody there offers something to the group. So maybe we'd get a baker, coffee maker, a carpenter, and just sort of like build this up, and then everybody has something to provide, and we just swap share everything.
Bro, you've just reminded me of something I came up with years ago when I was back in Tokyo. So I had this idea for a commune, because there's this. Do you know the word so, like beso or something, like the second house that some people have, and like,
no.
You say in the old days, people used to have like a second house up in the mountains in Japan.
Right.
And it's called like a beso, like a betsu so. But the kanji so is like I think it sort of means like dormitory or like place, like that sort of building. So for example, like the manga writers that did like Doraemon and that Astro Boy, they stayed in a place called Tokiwaso in East Tokyo. So anyway, I had this idea of making a place like that, like a kind of a building that people could stay in, and I was going to call it hakumaiso, like white rice, dormitory.
Nice.
And I've actually got the designs still for it. Like I had like this hanko, and I made all this stuff for it. And the idea was it was like a kind of a literary creative retreat, like a place people could go and work on projects in a very Japanese way. You know what I mean? Like kind of the shokunin, just like the zabuton, and maybe, like an old wooden building.
Has to be wooden, yeah.
Yeah, like a farmhouse kind of a thing. And I had these ideas, I was like, oh man, that'd be so cool. And actually, there's Louis Mendo did the Almost Perfect.
Almost Perfect.
Was that near you guys? Or
it was Asakusa, wasn't it?
Did you ever get out there, or?
Yeah, I went to meet Louis, and I still chat to him from time to time, but his idea, Almost Perfect, was he bought this old rice house, didn't he? This old rice workshop.
It was like a kura, yeah.
Yeah, and he turned it into an artist retreat where the top bedroom was sort of like Airbnb style, where you can rent it out. But what he would do is when somebody moved in to stay, he would help them set up an exhibition at the end of their stay. He would show them all the places in Japan to, get some inspiration, and he would sort of develop their artistic style. And I love that idea so much.
Cool. Yeah.
I feel bad because they were hit by the pandemic quite hard.
I think he's got a bunch of stuff he does, illustration. I've only met.
He's totally doing fine. Yeah, he's not struggling.
I've only met him once, I think, but I think the idea there though, which is definitely a very Japanese thing, right? This idea of like an old building and using it as a space, and it kind of reminds me of the Deacon Street as well. You guys kind of have that thing going on there. You must miss that sort of vibe a little bit, or?
I miss the community aspect of like local businesses. Like we were super close to all the local businesses around us, and we would do collaborations with, there was a cut sew manufacturer around the corner, and they made these beautiful big baggy shirts, and they dyed them with our coffee. So they were sort of coffee colored. And I adore that, like working together. We had a lot of waste, obviously, from our coffee. We were throwing away kilograms of it every day. So, give it to a local business to use. We had the honey, the honey farm just around the corner. We would sell their honey and products and stuff. I just love that, and I want to do that, but more on a sort of personal, closer scale, not in East Tokyo, but in sort of the backwoods of New Zealand.
Yeah, to be honest though, like if I could hit you with an idea, like I have a feeling that the reason that feeling is so strong when you're in Japan, and if anyone's been to Japan, there's not even like a way of really describing this feeling, but you know, that the idea of like a cozy little place that is your own, I think maybe is the easiest way to describe it. That sounds a bit quaint, but it is actually like something that becomes really important the longer you live there, because it's such a big city and so impersonal that you kind of need your own space. And you were talking about Brian Eno before and how he made his quietest music when he was living in New York, right? And so when you're living in the biggest city where you're the most nameless, person, you're just another number on the subway, that's when you desire the most to have this like place that's like your own little safe haven. I definitely, I can respond to that, because in Wellington, it's kind of the opposite. It's like, man, I see my friends on the street all the time. It's a small place. I can walk anywhere, and I can like just turn up at people's places and let myself in and help myself to food, like it's that kind of city already. It's a small town kind of really, and so I don't feel the need to be like, oh, well, I need another place that I can call my own. That's like a safe, a beautiful, small slice of life,
Yeah.
And if anything, I'm like, yeah, I'm nostalgic for the way it was in Tokyo. Because, you'd go, it's like, you go from A to B. It's like you go from your house, you've got to go on all these trains to get to this cool little cafe that's your own little place. But in that space, you're comfortable and it's nice. Because I felt that when at uni as well, when I was, at Meiji, Meiji Gakuen, or when I visit my friends at Musashino, at the university, they got this like safe haven and they can work on their creative projects, and it's very quaint, and especially in the winter time, and it's nice and warm inside, and you're working on stuff, and the smell of the oil paints. Oh, you just got me thinking about it now. Like, I don't know, like, but you know what I mean? Like, it's when you need it, you look for it, and you seek it out. And in New Zealand, we still have that. People go all the way. There is communes here, but I'm like, man, I'm already with my family. I see people on the street all the time. We have, it's a very, kind of outgoing and loving city, and so I don't know, it's kind of been, it's my I've been filled up, my glass is full with that, and I don't need to fill it anymore. But maybe London is a bit different.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It is very different in London. And people often say that if you live in London, you hate people because there's just too many of them. But what you were just saying about Wellington is that it's the sort of same feeling that I get when I'm in Brighton, when I'm down in Brighton, which is why I really, feel like Brighton is my second home. Although now it's been toppled by Kyoto. Kyoto really feels like a second home for me. But when I'm down in Brighton, I just see people that I know all the time, and there's little cafes that you can go to work, and you feel super comfortable, like you say. It's quite a creative city. It's not as crazy creative as London, but yeah, I feel a lot more creatively free down in Brighton and also Kyoto now, in these small cities where you know people and you feel comfortable, and you can go around someone's house for a cup of tea and chill out and talk about art and stuff. Yeah,
and I like that. It's sort of like a step back, right? And I think that's definitely what is lacking in Tokyo for a lot of people, and I found that. And so you do seek out those little spaces, and I've experienced that in a couple of other places, like in south of Taiwan, in Tainan. I've got to know these guys, this Australian guy and his wife and kid, and they run a kind of music studio / residency as well, similar to Almost Perfect.
Wow.
I think it's called Ting Dong or something, like listen and say, or something. Listen and make the sound, or something like that. Mm-hmm. Ting Shuo. So listen and say. And they got this little studio, and it was so cool because it's like an old school, Japanese style building in Taiwan from the colonial period. and they've done it up. It's kind of like, it's very similar to the kind of, what in an old Japanese building, but I think it was stone or concrete instead of wood. They did it up. They even had some tatami in that.
Nice.
And I was like, man, this is cool, this is really nice. And he had his studio, and I listened to some of it. He actually does ambient. Did I ever introduce you to him?
I don't think so. You're going to have to send him over, please.
Yeah. No, it's really cool, the Ting Shui. And they have people come through and do stuff. And I was like, man, this is quaint. This is beautiful. And I kind of wanted that. And I always thought, man, if I could do it again, I would do something like that. But the other thing is, you get locked into that thing. And I think for me, coming back to that Hakka ethos and the wanderer and all of that, it's like, I don't know, I could see myself kind of wanting to leave it behind pretty quickly,
After 5 years or something.
Not even that maybe. So, so look, man, it seems like today we've covered a few different topics. Well, I think it was a nice little.
This was fantastic, man. Journey. I really like this one. I think what I might do is be a bit more descriptive in the show notes about this one.
Yeah.
Because we talked about some really nice stuff.
Yeah.
So I'll write some links down below that people can check out, especially that last thing, Ting Shui.
Yeah. I've just found it. It's I'll send it through to you.
We'll place a link to that.
Yeah, and I'm going to introduce you to those guys. But hey, look, man, it was really nice to talk. I think we've decided. So we made some graphics for the show. You're liking that, right?
Love it.
Yeah,
it's such a beautiful photo.
Thank you. That actually interesting. That I mentioned the Tokiwaso before. That particular photo was when I was walking around the back streets of Ekota, which is near where Tokiwaso was, because that was all of these like manga artists back in the 60s that they lived around there. And it's a funny thing, the building is gone. They didn't even think about trying to preserve it, but there's now this whole street where they call it like the manga street, where all these guys used to live. But anyway, so we got the cover image, and we're kind of doing this a bit more regularly, right? So I'm hoping to do sort of every 2 weeks or so is catch up with you, talk about some stuff, share our ideas, see what people say. It's now live. It's on Spotify.
Yep. It'll be on Apple Podcasts soon. They're a bit slow to get stuff up. They have to check it and vet it. But it should be up on Apple Podcasts really soon. So maybe we can try for the 26th of June or somewhere around there for the next one.
Yeah, and we'll keep it up and go from there. But otherwise, I look forward to the next time we talk. And
sweet, man. Yeah,
sweet. Thank you very much.
Good to catch up. Okay. Have a good day, man. Take care.